Hi everyone, welcome back. For this video, I'm going to discuss monopoly. Monopoly is one of the structures under imperfect markets. We have the perfect and imperfect markets. The perfect market, we already have a video on that, which covers perfectly competitive or perfect competition. While in perfect markets, we would have 3 videos for monopoly, oligopoly, and monopolistic competition. So for this one, we will focus only on monopoly. So these are the 4 market structures. And for monopoly, the characteristics are as follows. So mono being 1, that means it indicates that the monopolist is the only one in the market selling a particular product or service. So the firm is in itself the industry. So this is very important to note. Okay, since siya lang ang nagbebenta in the market, then the monopoly is in itself the industry. And the monopoly is a price maker, unlike perfect competition, where the players or the companies just borrow what is the price in the market. For a monopoly, it is the one who has the power to state the price. So he is not, in terms of price leadership, it has price leadership. It is a price maker. With regards to barriers to entry and exit, in a monopoly, very high barriers to entry and exit. Hindi madaling makapasok sa industry na may isang monopoly. So, if the monopolist faces competition, he has what we call economies of scale para hindi siya matanggal sa kanyang position in the market. So, it's very difficult to penetrate an industry where there is a monopoly. The product that the monopoly sells has no close substitute. So in terms of product description, a monopoly product has no close substitute. Okay, compared to a perfectly competitive market wherein the product is homogeneous. Okay, same characteristic, but for a monopoly, the product has no close substitute. And the monopoly has full control over the supply, being the only one in the market. The monopoly also faces a downward sloping demand curve, which looks like this. Okay, so it is important to note that even if the monopoly is a price maker, he can state his price. The monopoly also faces a demand curve that is downward sloping, meaning people buying the good of the monopolist will only buy additional units if prices are going down. So the monopoly cannot really peg the price very high, because if it pegs the price so high to the extreme point of this demand curve on top, then they'll be able to sell very limited amount, or the demand for the good is very limited. But as the monopolist put down or lower down its price, dumadami yung nabebenta niyang unit. This concept is also very important to understand the monopolist revenue or marginal revenue curve. The marginal revenue curve for the monopoly looks like this. It is below the demand curve. The demand curve, the marginal revenue curve, the price, and the average revenue curve, if you remember, in a perfectly competitive market is one and the same. That perfectly elastic horizontal line in a perfectly competitive market. But in a monopoly, the demand curve and the marginal revenue curve are different, and it looks like this. The reason why the marginal revenue is below the demand curve is from the reason that for every unit that the monopoly can sell, he has to sell it on a lower price. That means his marginal revenue, or the revenue taken from additional units sold, keeps going down as you increase the quantity. So therefore, MR will always be lower than the demand curve. In this case, the demand curve is also equal to its price. Okay? Moving on. In this graph, we already added the marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve, again, just like in a perfectly competitive market, starts off high, starts going down, and then starts increasing. Here, the intersection is between the marginal revenue curve, the green line, and the yellow line, and it also intersects the demand curve. Remember the profit maximization rule or profit maximization point, would always be and still is, even in a monopoly, where MR is equal to MC. Okay? So marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And where is that point? Yes, the point where the yellow curve meets the marginal revenue curve, the green line. So that point gives us the profit maximization quantity. Okay? It also gives us the profit maximization price. But then, being a monopoly, the monopoly does not charge the price at that point. It will charge a price from the intersection of the yellow and the green line, which is the MC equals MR curve, or the point where they meet. It will rise up to the demand curve, and that is where the monopolist will peg its price. Later on, we can see that graph. Now, let's add the average total cost curve, also the same as how we draw it in a perfectly competitive market. So here you have the ATC. Okay? So let's look at the different concepts that come with this additional curve. So this is what I was talking about earlier. The first point where the yellow curve MC and the marginal revenue curve, the green one, meet is your profit maximization point. Okay? So where MC equals MR meet is your profit maximization rule. And at that point, it gives you your profit maximization quantity, the quantity where you get the most profit. But unlike in a perfectly competitive market where MC equals to MR, and that's where you would peg your price, a monopolist will not peg the price at that point but would move up to the demand curve, the blue line, and that is where it would peg its price. Okay? So that is the monopolist price now. From the MC equals MR curve or intersection, the point where you get your profit maximization quantity, you move up to the demand curve because that is where people are still willing to pay. So the monopolist will benefit from that because he will peg the price at that point, giving us our total revenue, where you have P times Q. Okay, so the brownish area is your total revenue area. Okay, now look at the pink area. That is our where our average total cost, okay, can be seen. Okay, so this is the cost of the firm. Okay, and the difference between the total revenue and the total cost will give us the monopolist profit, which is seen here with the gray area shown in the graph. So here you are. Using the average total cost curve, you're able to determine, okay, the firm's total cost, okay, the pink area, and deducting that from the space where P times Q is, which is our total revenue, we get our profit. So, the gray area now is the monopolist profit. Okay. Moving on. Now, we are being shown here another intersection, the intersection of the demand curve and the marginal cost curve. So, this point, okay, notice that at that point, price is lower than the monopolist price and quantity is more than the monopolist quantity. What is this point? This is what we call the socially optimal equilibrium. Meaning, if this is not a monopoly, if there are other players in the market, or if this is a perfectly competitive industry or market, then that point should be the socially optimal price and the socially optimal quantity. Okay? So, note the difference that since this is not where the monopolist is pegging its price, we see that the price is higher than the socially optimal price and the quantity is lesser than the socially optimal quantity. If you note the price and the quantity of the monopolist, the triangle on top of PM is the consumer surplus. So, in a monopolist, yun lang ang ating consumer surplus na nakukuha. Remember, consumer surplus is the difference between your willingness to pay and the price that you actually paid. So, the price that you actually paid for the monopolist good is PM. but we are actually willing to pay up to the point where the demand curve meets the vertical price line. So that area is our consumer surplus. So again, let us remember, the higher the consumer surplus, the happier we are as consumers. So in this case, our consumer surplus is only that little triangle there, since the monopolist is pegging the price at PM. And notice, if this is not a monopoly, then, and the price is lower at P, which is the socially optimal price, the consumer surplus, or the triangle above P, is actually bigger. So at the socially optimal point, which gives us the socially optimal price, consumer surplus is higher. So what does it mean? That in a monopolist ay may nawawala sa ating consumer surplus. Alright? Kasi dapat nasa sa P lang yung price natin kung hindi iisa ang nagbebenta. Pero dahil iisa ang nagbebenta, kaya niyang ipeg ang price ng mas mataas, mas kokonti ang ating consumer surplus. So, there is the supposedly consumer surplus natin if we are at the socially optimal price point. Okay? So, yan lang ang ating consumer surplus kapag monopoly ang industry. Meaning, any industry, any market, okay, na may monopolyo, ay mas kokonti ang ating consumer surplus. And note that small triangle, okay? Note the small triangle above the two lines. Yan ang portion ng consumer surplus na nawawala dahil nang ipineg ng monopoly ang price niya ng mas mataas. So, yung nawalang yon, ang tinatawag natin doon ay deadweight loss. Okay? May nawala sa consumer at may nawala din sa part ng mga sellers. Dahil nga, iisa ang nagbebenta. So, if you notice, kung halimbawa ang price ay nasa P, which is the socially optimal price, magkakaroon ng ibang mga players, ng mga ibang sellers, at ang quantity natin ay dapat ay nasa Q instead of QM. So, therefore, kapag nag-move pabalik ng Q, papuntang QM, meaning nag-isa na lang yung nagbebenta ng good, may area din dun sa below, okay, nung triangle ng consumer surplus na nag-a-accrue or part of the seller's benefit ay nawawala din. So, both from the seller's perspective and both from the supply perspective and from the demand perspective, parehong may nawawala. Dahil na may iisa lang na nagbebenta ng good na yan sa market. And yung nawawalang yon is the triangular area, okay, given by the 2 points there and the space between the yellow, yellow space, okay, and that is what we call the deadweight loss. Alright? So, I'm sorry I wasn't able to show a specific arrow to put a deadweight loss there. Inaalam ko pa kung paano yan. Pero yung area ng deadweight loss is the triangle there. That is lost because of a monopoly pegging its price at a higher point and producing at a lower quantity. Again, the deadweight loss is the loss in benefit from the consumer's perspective as well as from other sellers' perspective just because there's only one seller pegging the price at a higher price point and producing at a lower quantity. Okay? So, this graph naman shows us yung mga decisions kapag nagkakaroon ng pagtaas ang total cost of production kaysa sa price na charge ng monopolist. So, again, just like in perfect competitive market, the demand curve is also your price. So, therefore, if your average total cost of production is higher than the price you charge, therefore, you create a loss. And ATC here is way above the demand curve, and that yellow space there is the loss accrued to the monopolist. Okay? But, in this drawing, ATC, if you notice, is below the demand curve. Okay? Yung yellow line is below the blue line, dark. Okay? Demand equals average revenue equals to price. So, yung yellow line na yan ay below the demand curve. So, that area, okay, the green shaded area is the firm's profit or economic profit. So, the firm's economic profit in this case is positive. Okay? And in this case, it's a loss. Alright? Now, take note of this graph. AVC is shown here curving below the demand curve. Alright? When AVC is below the demand curve, even if ATC is way above the demand curve, you still can you can still produce. You can still opt not to shut down. Okay? Pero kapag ang AVC and ATC is both above the demand curve, then you are gaining so much losses, so therefore, a monopolist can shut down. So, kailan ang shutdown decision? Kapag ang ATC is above the demand curve at kapag ang AVC ay above the demand curve. Okay? Remember, the space between AVC and ATC is your average fixed cost because AVC plus AFC is equal to ATC. So, kaya, makikita ninyo here, ang ATC mas mataas kaysa AVC kasi yung space na yon, yun ang kanyang average fixed cost. So what this graph is saying is hindi kayang bayadan ng monopolist ang kanyang fixed cost. Pero kaya pa niyang bayaran ang kanyang average variable cost. So our guideline is if the firm can still pay for its variable cost like raw materials, you can still produce, isn't it? And as long as you can still produce with your variable cost paid, then do not shut down. Pero kapag all of your costs are above the demand curve, which is also your price line, then you have to shut down. Okay? And this graph, of course, keep on producing because you have an area for economic profit. Okay? So here, in the short run, ganyan ang itsura ng monopolist profit. It is positive. And what about in the long run? Remember, in a perfectly competitive market, sa short run, ang perfectly competitive ay positive. But in the long run, it becomes, it approaches zero. Ang monopoly ba similar? No. Kaya ang perfectly competitive ay nag-a-approach sa zero dahil ng anyone who wants to join the market, if there is positive profit, positive economic profit, they can easily do so. But in a monopoly, kahit makita ng mga competitor na malaki ang kinikita ng monopolist, hindi madaling pumasok sa isang monopoly. Okay? Kasi ang monopoly ay very high barriers to entry and exit. Plus, the monopolist can use various techniques in order to maintain its monopolistic position in the market. There are two ways. One, the monopolist has economies of scale na hindi pa na-achieve ng bagong player. Okay? Remember our concept of economies of scale, that as you produce more, your average total cost decreases. So kapag bago kang player, most probably or not, talagang ikaw ay wala ka pang economies of scale. Second, pagkaya ng monopolist ay take note, mataas ang kanyang economic profit, pwede niyang ibagsak ang kanyang presyo o lower down its price para yung new entrant ay hindi makapag-compete. Okay? So, yung new entrant, pumasok siya, maybe similar to the previous price of the monopoly, pero nung mapansin ng monopoly na meron siyang pumapasok na kalaban or competitor, pwede niyang ibagsak ang kanyang presyo na hindi naman kayang i-compete ng new entrant. So, because of that, the monopoly can maintain its position in the market. So, in the long run, bottom line, in the long run, a monopolist profit stays positive. Ma-achieve at ma-achieve niya yan dahil nang mahirap pasukin ang kanyang industry o ang kanyang firm. Ay mahirap makipag-compete. Okay? So, lastly, ang isa nating tanong na pwedeng i-link sa monopoly, is it always bad then? Is monopoly always bad? Okay, there are arguments that says monopoly is not always bad. At ang unang reason ay nabanggit ko na. Kapag may mga bagong entrant, okay, na gusto makipag-compete, the monopolist starts lowering its price and we benefit from that lowering of price. That's the first. And second, ang profit nga naman is concentrated into one firm. So, it is said that a monopoly would use that concentrated profit into making sure that the product is continuously improving through research and development. So because of R&D, mas gumaganda daw yung produkto, nagiging mas efficient, kaysa sa kung maraming nagbebenta na nagsi-zero out ang profit. Pero dahil ang profit dito only accrues to one seller, then the seller can continuously improve the product and the consumers benefit from it. Okay? So hopefully, you were able to understand this concept of monopoly and the graph for the monopoly. Ang mga kailangan tandaan is decision rules when you have the ATC and the AVC, and then why the marginal revenue curve is down lower than the demand curve, the profit maximization point and the monopolist price and monopolist quantity, socially optimal price and socially optimal quantity, what is the consumer surplus under monopoly and consumer surplus if it is socially optimal, and the deadweight loss, and the benefits and inefficiencies of a monopolistic market. Okay, thank you.